Hey everyone, welcome back to Micro Minutes, the podcast where we take big economic ideas and make them actually make sense. I'm your host Elena, and today we've got a special guest in the studio.
Glad to be here. I'm Daniel, a development economist who spends way too much time thinking about how countries grow or why they don't.
And today we're unpacking exactly that. What makes nations develop, why some stay stuck, and what actually works to reduce poverty. Okay, let's dive in. So, Daniel, before we get into the heavy stuff, let's set the stage here.
Yeah, we should probably tell people what development economics even is. Development economics isn't just about GDP or income. We look at education, health, life expectancy, institutions, stability, basically all the things that decide a person's actual quality of life.
So it's like the economics version of how do we make countries actually function?
Exactly. And one thing people forget is development isn't automatic. Countries don't magically go from poverty to prosperity. It takes structure, policy, and sometimes straight up luck.
And patience, lots of patience. Alright, so that brings us to the big question humans have been arguing about forever.
Yep. Why are some countries rich and others poor? Brace yourselves. A major factor is institutions. Countries with strong rule of law, low corruption, and predictable government policies tend to grow faster. If investors can't trust courts or contracts, they'll go elsewhere.
Yeah, nobody's dropping billions into roll the dice stand.
Exactly. Then there's human capital. Low education and poor healthcare reduce productivity. Another issue is geography. Landlocked countries or malaria-heavy regions deal with hurdles others don't.
And then the dreaded poverty trap.
Yep. If people are too poor to save, they can't invest. If they can't invest, they stay poor. It's the economic version of quicksand.
So it's not that people aren't trying, the system is literally rigged against them.
Right. Development is about breaking those structural barriers.
Okay, that was the depressing part. Let's lighten the mood a bit.
Yeah. Let's talk about what actually works, because there are solutions. A lot of progress comes from micro interventions. These are small, targeted solutions that improve daily life, like clean water access, mosquito nets, microloans, or health programs.
Right, the stuff that seems tiny but changes everything.
Exactly. The big tool in modern development is randomized controlled trials, or RCTs. We basically experiment with policies to see what works in the real world.
Like when countries pay families to keep their kids in school?
Yep, those conditional cash transfers. Brazil and Mexico saw huge long-term benefits, but we also found some hyped ideas, like microloans, don't magically create millions of entrepreneurs. Helpful, but not a miracle.
So development economists are out here fact-checking everything?
Exactly. Data before theory, always.
But those are the small fixes. What about the big glow-ups? The we went from poor to powerhouse stories.
Yeah, let's zoom out. For long-term growth, countries need macro-level changes. Infrastructure, education systems, stable governance, strategic trade policies, the whole package.
South Korea is like the global rags to riches story, right?
Exactly. In the 1950s, it was one of the poorest nations. They invested heavily in education and industrialization, and now they're basically a tech superpower.
Rwanda's another big one.
Yep, rebuilding strong institutions led to massive reductions in poverty and improvements in health. It shows how crucial stability and governance are.
So there's hope. It's not hard, but possible. Alright, before we wrap up, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room.
Yep, the ethics of development. A big debate is whether foreign aid actually helps. Some say it boosts development. Others argue it creates dependency.
And then there's climate change. Developing countries want cheap energy to grow, but rich countries are like, whoa, whoa, think about the planet.
Exactly. Even though those rich countries polluted for decades, development is economic, but it's also moral and political.
Daniel, thank you for dropping all this knowledge. This was like a TED Talk, but without the $3,000 plane ticket.
Anytime. I love talking about this stuff.
And thanks to everyone listening to Micro Minutes. If you learned something today, share this episode with a friend who still thinks GDP stands for gross domestic pizza. We'll see you next time.